video game begins as an idea, before it's a level or mechanic, a character or a story. Before the miracle of video game development brings it to life, the game lies right here between the folds. Psychonauts. It's probably one of the biggest cult classics of the 3D platforming universe. It unfortunately released a very little fanfare, being widely considered a commercial failure back when it first launched on Xbox. But its mind-bending levels, badass psychic moveset, and brilliantly written characters would be experienced for years to come, thanks to the availability and affordability of the PC version. But despite that upswing, it still felt like Psychonauts 2 was doomed to remain a mere idea. The water that seed needs is big bucks, boyo, and trying to fund a game like Psychonauts 2 in a climate where every company wants the absolute maximum return out of their games, chasing trends and churning a profit from their software in any microscopic way possible? Good luck. This wasn't 2003, where companies like EA and Activision would actually throw money at stuff like Ty the Tasmanian Tiger anymore. Now, this was no longer an era of big publishers actually producing stuff other than the same few things that make them the most money. I mean, even Sony's doing that now. But then, it happened. The 2015 Game Awards. I watched the impossible unfold before my very eyes.
Send in the Psychonauts.
I didn't believe it. Like, how in the hell did Schafer get a company on board with funding the sequel to a commercial flop? Well, he didn't. Dude, it was 2015. Crowdfunding was bigger than ever, and that did seem like the logical way we could finally let a vocal minority vote with their dollar. The campaign succeeded, getting just 16% over its goal. It was like a miracle. All of this untapped potential, all of those narrative seeds planted at every turn. We would finally see Psychonauts 2 become more than just an idea. But not before they did a weird VR spin-off, Psychonauts in the Rhombus of Ruin. You'll need these! Yeah, that's a good way to scare people away. Tell them they need an expensive headset to play the thing. Imagine being out of the loop and you go to the game store and you see this on the shelf, a brand new Psychonauts game sitting right there, and you pick it up and it's like, oh, it's just like a weird VR thing. Why'd they make this? Well, I guess PSVR was brand spanking new at the time, so it was like a new thing you were able to jump on, and they would have had those new models prepared for that trailer, right? So I guess they're like, hey, we got like a budget now and these new models, why don't we make a quick little side thing we can sell to help secure more budget for the second game, sort of thing. That's how I saw it, at least. I know $3 million sounds like a lot of money, but video games are really expensive to make. You're paying a full team of developers to do it full time over the course of many, many years, right? You can tell that Schafer and crew learned a lot from that Broken Age campaign, running out of funds and having to sell half the game a year early to fund the rest of it. So, as weird as this VR thing is, I do find it really interesting seeing how Schafer considered that this time and then thought to do a side hustle to secure more budget. And yeah, I remember a lot of people really didn't like how that whole Broken Age thing was handled back then, but you do at least have to give the guy credit for learning from the experience. We're not looking at Psychonauts 2 Part 1 or an incomplete version of what this game could have been. No, we're looking at the full-ass vision here. That said, I also know people aren't really a big fan of Psychonauts content being locked behind an expensive VR headset, so before we get into the second game, why don't we see if there's anything here that's more than just like, we put some models in a VR room and made something. Stotts in the Rhombus picks up directly where Stotts 1 left off. Departing the campground in the Psychonauts jet, we're embarking on a mission to rescue Lily's father, Truman, who is the grand head of the Psychonauts. So if you played anything that's like point and click in VR, like a Deracine or Accounting Plus, then you more or less know what to expect here. You're warping between fixed points, you're interacting with the environment in simple ways, solving simple puzzles, and of course, beating your favorite character senseless with whatever you got lying around.
This is not the moment, Raz.
All the usual suspects of an early VR game. It's kind of fun using Raz's psychic abilities in VR. Clairvoyance is what you'll use to warp around, seeing through the eyes of all these different characters. The whole game pretty much revolves around doing that. You can also grab stuff with telekinesis, set things ablaze with pyrokinesis, and of course shoot stuff with your side blast.
Blammo!
It's a pretty short experience, only took me about 2 hours to finish, and it is okay. 1 or 2 of the puzzles are pretty cool, but there's not really a ton going on here. You do get a little bit more backstory on Lobato, which is really cool, and I do really like getting to hear all of the extra banter between the characters.
I didn't know you liked this kind of music.
That's not mine.
Hey! Get away from my stuff!
But as a VR advocate, I'm gonna be honest, there's much better VR stuff out there. It's one of those things that I guess would make for a great introduction to VR, being so simple and totally absent of locomotion like more intense games. It feels more like a pack-in title sort of thing. I don't even really necessarily think the game had to be in VR though. Like, it's not like Astrobot where you physically interact with the character and they get a lot out of the 3D head tracking. No, you're just kinda like pointing and clicking, so while the VR is fine and cool and all, I think it should have been an optional way to play instead of the only way to play. I'd only bother with it if A, you're a huge Psychonauts fan and you want the side stuff, and B, if you already have a VR, it is not worth buying the entire thing for, in the way that games like Superhot and Beat Saber are. Now, if you're wondering how integral the plot of this thing is for Psychonauts 2, well, it is meant to bridge the gap between the two games, but what happens can really just be boiled down to one sentence. They go to the Rhombus of Ruin and save Lily's dad. That's really it. That's all you gotta know. You're missing out on some funny-looking fish guys making some funny sounds, but nothing really critical to the story that you're not just gonna see in the recap. So don't worry about missing anything important here. You'll still follow along just fine. Yeah, it really does just feel like something to mull the fans over until the second game came out. At least the fans that had a VR headset. Yeah, I don't know. It's a really weird thing. Even weirder is that, like, it got a physical print while the actual Psychonauts 2 didn't. Available digital only, at least as of this video. What a shame too, the game's key artwork is incredible looking. What a sick homage to the original 2D illustration, man. It would have looked amazing on a game case. Maybe it had something to do with the 2019 Microsoft Acquisition? That was something I sure as hell didn't see coming, but you know, with Sony flaunting just how many AAA studios they own these days, it looks like Xbox wants to play catch up. I mean, hell, they even bought Bethesda of all things. Being owned by a really big company is certainly a double-edged sword. On one hand, you got funding, but on the other, they now control everything you make. But I mean, hey, if it meant they would have the proper budget to smoothly finish Psychonauts 2 and fully craft it into the AAA brain-busting super experience it deserves to be, then I mean, hey, can you really complain? Microsoft giving money to smaller, weirder projects just might be this generation's one saving grace, but let's not get ahead of ourselves. Psychonauts 2 is out, baby! I got it installed on my PS4 Pro, 79 Canadian dollars. Is it worth the wait? Worth the full price? Worth selling Double Fine's bone marrow to Phil Spencer? I don't know yet, but I'm pretty damn excited to find out. Okay, you know a company's great at writing when even the new version of their logo kind of tells a story. Xbox helping to launch the game, right? I thought it was really clever. Ooh, that's cool. I kind of miss the interactivity the original title screen had, but this is wicked cool. Each option being a brain in a jar. The original title screen, I think, is a lot more creative, but hey, I'll take it.
My name is Raz, and today is my first official day on the job.
Okay, so instead of opening to the hub world, having you walk up to the first level, Psychonauts 2 instead cold opens right into the first mission, and the entire sequence is so brilliant, so genius. The way it has you slowly cluing into... Okay, it's not gonna have the same effect if I spoil it, so I'm gonna let it be a surprise, but take my word for it. It is such a cool freaking intro. So skipping by spoilers, we eventually land inside Lobato's mind as the first real level, and this is where it starts to sink in just how high the production value here is. The characters look unbelievably clean now. The animation is top freaking notch too. They are more expressive than ever before. I was a little bit worried how the art style would translate into HD, but no, they did an amazing job. They almost feel like dolls or puppets for a stop motion film, you know, like the materials you see their clothes and skin made out of. It almost feels like a Henry Selick film, almost. It's a really good example of how photorealistic textures can be used to craft non-realistic characters. I know a lot of people still aren't fond of the art direction though. I got a ton of comments last time confirming that. If you weren't a fan of the visuals to begin with, then not much is gonna change here. But hey, for those that do love the weirder art direction of Psychonauts, you guys are in for a treat. That janky asymmetry you see when you look at the moon, or those whimsical swirls you see baked into rock formations, all of the visual quirks that inspired adventure in the first game are all back in full force, and they are more incredible looking than ever before. Lobato's mind does a great job of realizing reeling us in. I thought the way each power was tutorialized in the first game was a little annoying, but no, here it's all seamless. They never pause the experience to teach you something. It just gives you the series of obstacles that call for each one like it should. This place is bananas looking, man. I totally understand the dentophobia warning though, so apologies if the footage kind of grosses you out, but man, holy crap, I thought the inside of Lobato's mind would be twisted, but wow, gums and teeth wrapping around the environment like scaffolding. You're plucking out teeth like a gross Ren and Stimpy episode and chucking it at guys. It is a little bit stomach churning, but in the most fun way possible. Once you're done with the first level, we're then introduced to the new hub world. Time to say farewell to Whispering Rock and hello to the Mother Lobe, the Psychonauts HQ. You'll initially just have access to the interior where not a whole lot's going on, but you'll later get to explore the quarry outdoors and the neighboring park. The questionable area, where every sign is unsure. This is hands down my favorite chunk of the hub world. It does a really great job of capturing the same feeling the campground for the first game did, but it also does a really good job of standing out as its own thing too. We opened this rundown parking lot with this abandoned pancake house next to a national park with all these fun little attractions like a backwards waterfall, the Sasquatch cave. The environments are really endearing here. You're swinging off of dinosaur bones, you're up in the trees, you get to fix the slow ass funicular and ride it all the way up for 30 minutes.
Funicular!
It kind of feels like they wanted to pack everything you'd expect from the campground into a smaller and flatter, more digestible zone, and I think it was a really great way to call back to the environments of the first game, while still feeling unique from them, and while having brand new types of settings as well. As much as the Mother Lobe does pale in comparison to the outdoor locations, there are a lot of fun little things to find here as well, though I do wish more of the collectibles were tucked away better. I feel like half of these are just sitting out in the open. Getting to talk to the characters between missions, I think, is where the Mother Lobe shines most, though. There's a lot of great optional dialogue with characters like Oleander that you should definitely keep an eye out for.
Sent her out to get some Nunya.
What's Nunya?
None your business.
And of course, a Psychonauts hub world would not be complete without a wicked good fast travel system, so like the first game, you won't be wasting any time at all running between areas. Alright, so structurally speaking, Psychonauts 2 is pretty much the same as before. You'll bounce between the hub area and all these different levels that take place inside the minds of various characters, and along the way you'll climb up through the ranks, earning new abilities and strengthening your existing ones. Since Raz is already a fully fledged Psy cadet, this time we're working up the ranks as a true Psychonaut intern.
Don't be late for orientation.
Sorry, buddy, but you're still too young to join the big boys like Mia and Sasha, so this time around, Rads is gonna spend his time learning with his fellow classmates, even picking up a few new moves along the way.
Ooh, looks like I can choose where to focus my energy and upgrade my powers.
In the first game, you would just unlock whatever ability you got at that level, but now you'll earn ability points you can freely spend on the abilities you want, giving you way more control over developing your character, which I thought was a really cool change. I loved being able to prioritize the abilities that I thought sounded more fun to use. So instead of all those weird little kids at camp, our peers this time around are a bunch of teenagers learning to become Psychonauts at the Mother Lobe. I really like Norma, and I think Dogen's sister Sam's gonna be a really big fan favorite.
Where'd you learn how to make pancakes?
Prison.
But overall, I felt kinda underwhelmed by them this time. I mean, don't get me wrong, they're not bad designs, and the dialogue you do get from these characters is really fun. I especially love Morris and his pirate radio station.
Relax, Morris. I'm not a narc.
Exactly what a narc would say.
But the kids at Whispering Rock were just so much more weird, and I really loved that. Sam manages to harness some of that quirkiness you'd expect from those characters, but I feel like they're really holding back with most of these new guys. I don't know, maybe it makes the game easier to look at for everybody that hated the art style before, but I really don't think it was worth it. They should have pushed further. They should have made them all look and act like they crawled out of a dumpster full of nails. Norma is a really good character though, because, we previously saw Raz completely immune to bullying, right? So it was kinda cool seeing a totally different kind of bully that actually can get under Raz's skin.
This is embarrassing in so many ways.
So despite the safer designs, I do applaud the writing for finding different sorts of characters that are able to get brand new reactions out of Raz, instead of just doing the same old song and dance again. As for the new adult characters though, I do like a lot of these designs a lot, like Forsyth, one of the higher ups at the Psychonauts HQ. I love the sharp shoulders, the asymmetry, the football head. Most of the NPCs walking around just kind of look like Muppets, but as for the major characters, I think they did a really good job of creating designs that really nails each different personality.
Now, tell us again how you ended up outside in your underwear.
Oh,
Otto, he's another one of my favorites, one of the old Psychic Six.
Someday, my brain will live here, and yours too.
what?
should have read that NDA more carefully.
He's a great character, kind as a teddy bear, but lacking in a moral compass for sure. Alright, now that we're walking around, why don't we see what we got for a moveset here this time. Okay, a good blend of old and new, but in that perfect way where the old feels new. Firstly, everything is way snappier. The jump's got this spring to it now. You pop faster into a gentler arc, getting you up into the air quicker while giving you more control over the air time. It feels really good. The double jump's quicker, the climbing animations are snappier, getting up on those ropes is faster. Everything's been tweaked and tightened up, and it feels incredible. If you thought Raz felt good to control in Psychonauts 1, you're gonna have a field day here, dude. Though I'm really not a fan of how they changed swinging on poles. Maybe hitting a button to turn around was something people found too clunky. Now you just push the stick in the direction you want them to swing, and yeah, it kinda does it all for you, but I found myself falling off these things way more often in this game. It's because if you... Get out of here. It's because if you try jumping before the swing really starts going, you fall. But now that I'm only hitting a stick, my brain expects me to go right away, if that makes any sense. Maybe speeding up the turnaround animation, having more immediacy to when you can jump. I think that would improve the game feel here a lot. There's also this brand new dive move now too. I didn't really find a whole lot of use for it at first with its sharp downward arc, but by the end of the game, there were plenty of times I saved my ass with it. One really weird thing I found is that you can turn off the fall damage. Very strange that's a choice. I think fall damage is very contextual. It makes sense in some games and not at all in others, and I'm gonna argue it does not make sense in this game, so I think you should turn it off, and here's why. So, fall damage only really makes sense if you want to be up here and not down here, like, you know, take away some health as punishment for making the error of falling. But if being up here is equally as valuable as being down here, like in an open world game like Mario Odyssey, if there's stuff to do up here and you just want to get down faster to do the stuff down there, why punish the player for that, right? So since that doesn't make any sense, they actually decided to not have fall damage in that game. It's pretty much the same deal here. Anytime you should be punished for falling, they just use a bottomless pit, so turning this off only makes it easier to get down faster, and there's no real point in punishing the player for that. Now, the one move I definitely have the most mixed feeling towards is the brand new wall jump. Yeah, Raz can wall jump now. Wild, right? Wall jumps are a very tricky thing. I've only played like 5 games total that have really good wall jumps. And I think they're all Mario. Most games just do that really basic magnetic thing where you can really only interact with the obstacle in one single fixed way. You're just hitting the jump button and you're not really doing anything. It's pretty rare that you get nuanced wall jumping. You know, like full control over the angle and speed and trajectory. You could throw Mario at the same wall again and again and again and get totally different results each and every time. So with that control, it's now on me to get up there instead of being on the level to get me up there, if that makes sense. This one's somewhere in between. It's okay. It's far from giving you the freedom that Mario games and Blue Fire do if you played that, but it does feel like a small step away from that strict magnetism. The snappiness of it is kind of weird though. You gotta wait for Raz to enter that wall sliding animation to wall jump, and that is normally the smoothest way to do it, but I do find sometimes it takes Raz a little bit too long to stick to the walls, so I end up hitting the button a bit early and I just fall off. I think the feel of it needs a bit of work, but hey, it's still better than most wall jumps I've seen. Well, there's all the physical moves. As for the psychic abilities, not all of them returned, but the ones that do have been tweaked quite a bit. Let's start with the levitation so we can wrap up the platforming moves. I loved how this felt in Psychonauts 1. It was floaty, it was bouncy, it was fun and smooth as butter to control, but it was a bit overpowered. Pretty easy to just soar over everything and skip a lot of stuff. I mean, it is a really fun way to break the game, but I'm not gonna pretend like granting the player the ability to trivialize all of your level design is good game design, as fun as it can be. So with all that considered, levitation's got some limitations this time. Firstly, you no longer jump really high in the air. It's more of a long jump than an everything jump this time, and the floating move will only last a couple of seconds now, so you can't rely on it nearly as much for overly precise landings. You can still get a lot of speed and distance out of this thing though. It's just as fun to pop into for a quick launch or as a quick way to get around, but now it feels a little bit more earned. When I'm breezing through platforms on this thing, I feel like having it all reeled back just a bit, it's now requiring a little bit more thought and care than it did in the first game, and by extension, I felt a lot more engaged by the movement here. And since it's dialed back, I also felt more compelled to actually string it into other moves, making the platforming way more freeform this time. You can still jump really high on it, but that's now a separate move entirely. Hold the button to push down and let go to launch upward. Really good for clearing tall objects, but now in a way that can't be used to just skip everything. Man, having this many moves, this many new ways I can string together a different series of movements to solve the environment in different ways, it's not quite that Mario 64 magical feeling, but it's kinda close. I found myself stringing together all these moves all the time in all sorts of tricky different ways, and that is what it's all about. Having a wide arsenal of moves that challenges you to take on the environment in a way that you thought of yourself. And the first game was great for that with puzzle solving, but this time it feels like they went the extra mile, considering that even more for the platforming. I don't think the level design always manages to take advantage of these new moves, but it is still an awesome moveset that I had a freaking blast using. The open-ended areas definitely make the most out of it. Now, the other psychic abilities, like the Psy Blast and the Pyrokinesis, they can all be used pretty much at the same time now. It is unbelievably smooth. You're gonna be rolling and blasting and firing it up all simultaneously. The game does not make you wait for one or the other now. The freedom to switch between powers at such a breakneck pace this time, it feels amazing. I love the way they changed the Pyrokinesis. Instead of staying still as a statue as you pray a meter fills up before you take damage, you now generate this expanding bubble that you can aim around on the fly, igniting everything inside when you let go of the button. And you can still move and jump and dodge and shoot. You can still do everything during the charge. There's even some new uses for it too, like making updrafts you can use levitation on. Throwing objects with telekinesis has also been streamlined. It'll now just launch whichever direction you're facing when you let go of the button, instead of using a stick to make that arc. Now it's just grab, launch, grab, launch. It's so much faster. Clairvoyance more or less works the same way as the first one, letting you see through different people's eyes, but and now you can use it to spot hidden caches of Titanium, so there's more incentive to look through these people's eyes than just seeing how they see you. But let's be real, that was already enough incentive as it was. It's just so goofy. Sam sees you as a squirrel. Squirrels see us. They did so freaking many of these. The extra cash was nice and all, but no, the effort they put into this alone was enough for me. That's what we have for returning abilities. It is amazing how streamlined these all feel now, but that's not all. We also have a couple of brand new psychic abilities as well. The first one's a grapple move, Mental Connection. Raz can use this to grapple up to these stray thoughts that float around in the world. Grapple moves are always a ton of fun. There's a bunch of different ways to do them too. You won't be swinging off into the air or anything here. It'll just bring you to a fixed point. I kind of prefer grapples that give you air time to play with, but I would be lying if I didn't say that I loved how this thing felt. It's like the perfect marriage between the hookshot from Zelda and that high energy spamminess the homing attack in older 3D Sonic games had. When you see those bubbles and you mash through it with this visceral energy, each sound increasing in pitch as you go, 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 go. It's like the Psychonauts equivalent of the loop-the-loop, it kind of does itself, but you don't care because A, it's really fun, and B, they sprinkle it around here and there, so it's not like they're relying on it. It's just like a little treat every now and then. Though I do think the mental connection shines the most when you're using it for solving puzzles. Carefully plotting a path between each point to link two thoughts together, which creates an idea.
What if my husband starts wearing socks with sandals? Could I still love him?
You can also find stray thoughts up in the overworld if you get one of Otto's gadgets. It's kind of like a metal detector, but it detects these grapple points that lead up to these secret areas. It adds a lot to the exploration.
People might think this thought tuner looks dorky, but I think it's cool.
As for the other new moves, there's a time bubble that slows down platforms, and mental projection. It's kind of like an imaginary friend that pulls switches and stuff for you.
Sup, clone?
Aw, that's cute. My clone thinks he's real.
I kind of wish we got something a little more creative than just slowing down time, though. Like, I was hoping for something that felt more like a psychic power, right? Like brain control or reading minds or something like that, but this is just something I've seen other platformers do already. The game is still very good about getting the most out of your abilities, so it did at least have me actively thinking about the environment I was in, since you always have it in your toolbox, instead of just being given it when you need it. The little buddy is definitely the one move that don't get a ton of use out of this time. It is great in the one level that has emphasis on it, and it also has a lot of implication in the combat too, but I never really found myself using him a whole lot later on. You really only needed to open these doors here, and then that's about it. So with 3 new moves, that omits 3 from the first game. That is no more shield, no more confusion grenades, and no more invisibility. Don't really miss the confusion grenades at all, but man, invisibility was cool. You could have done so much more with it too. Every puzzle in the first game was just turn invisible and walk by. But now that you can use multiple psi powers together, like imagine if you went invisible and then used your telekinesis to sabotage something. I'm not gonna lose sleep over it, but it would have been really cool. I can live without the shield though, especially since this game's combat has a way higher focus on the movement. I don't think I ever saw myself saying this, but this is actually really good combat. I mean, like, really good combat. And that's coming from somebody who spent years of his life criticizing combat and platformers. I think it's something that's like so easy to do wrong if you create this thing that feels like a totally separate experience from the core gameplay that you actually bought the game for. And when I say combat, I don't mean Mario punching a Goomba or Spyro running a guy over. Those are more like obstacles. When I say combat, I mean like engaging with the guy. There's not a whole lot of platformers that I think do that well. Rayman 2 and 3 are pretty good, but even then they're kind of basic, and it does take a back seat. Ratchet & Clank has amazing combat, but barely any actual platforming. They're more or less combat games made with platforming movesets. And there are other examples of good platforming combat, but nothing that ever really felt to me like it was truly getting as much out of the core moveset as the platforming and exploration would. If you could turn all of this into fighting without sacrificing the focus on jumping and moving, only then could you completely unionize the two. Now, with all of that said, the combat in Psychonauts 1 was decent. It did take advantage of most of your core moves, and it did have a lot of movement involved too, but it was really easy to trivialize by just dodging and side-blasting, and there wasn't really a whole lot of enemy variety either. And then I played this. I got to a fight in Psychonauts 2, and like a tidal wave, it hit me. This thing that I've been thinking was impossible for years, completely figured out and polished to a T. Psyblast for peppered in the bee stings, your pyro for the AoE, grapple, get over here, telekinesis, rip shit off this guy and throw it at that guy. You're gonna be doing 2 of these things at once, while dodging and while jumping, because this is hands down the best combat I've ever played in a platformer, dude. I really mean that. Like, this is the one that figures it out. It recontextualizes all of the abilities you've already been using the whole game as a new way to move that combat forward. Even clairvoyance has a combat use now with these guys. They're called bad moods. You gotta use clairvoyance to see their weak points, you run over, and take care of it in the midst of the chaos. This is one of the many new enemy types they added to really get the most out of the moveset and the combat here. We got bad ideas, judgment, doubts, regrets. They're all based on different negative mental habits, and they'll all require a different string of moves to effectively deal with too. I thought the enablers were just pure genius. These guys will cast shields on all the other enemies, so it's kind of like they're enabling the bad habits. I thought that was really clever. These guys will become priority targets that you'll have to take out first. Knowing how much influence Schafer takes from the Rayman series, I really wouldn't be surprised if they just straight up stole this enemy from Rayman 3. But I mean, that's just how it's done, right? You gotta take ideas from the very best and make them even better. And that's exactly how it feels like here. It feels like they're taking that exact same enemy and throwing it into a context that works even better for it. And then we got panic attacks. Oh, when these boys show up, you know it's gonna be a fun-ass fight. They're fast as lightning, so you gotta whip out these moves that slow them down and close the gap. Now, and speaking of closing the gap, you ever hit the attack button in a game and you're too far away from the enemy, so you just swing at the air like an idiot? They got that ironed out here. If you're a little bit far off, Raz will just launch himself forward to close the distance. It's snappy, it's chaotic, and it's finally something that has that same level of variety and freedom that you'd expect from the puzzles and platforming. There is such a wide array of really fun enemies that all have multiple viable strategies that all bounce off of the different combinations of your psi powers. We are breaking into that same toolbox to solve what's in front of us in a similar manner. We're not stopping Mario for Mortal Kombat, we're not stopping Sonic for Street Fighter, we're stopping Psychonauts for more Psychonauts. Well, I can't exactly say I ever saw myself going on an excited spiel about combat in a platforming game. It's not that I don't like combat, I just like good combat, and you usually only find good combat in combat games like God of War or Bloodborne. Not usually a platformer like this, but Psychonauts 2 just does it in a way I've never really seen before, and I think it should be a shining example of how you can effectively bring these two things together and make something really freaking fun out of it. Instead of being like, time to punch the guy for 5 minutes and then go back to what I actually want to do, you know? So now that we actually have really good combat, the pacing here just becomes mwah! Each level is rich with obstacles that'll all test your abilities, but now we get these visceral bursts of exciting chaos to break up each sequence. And they never throw too many fights at you either, so there's always plenty of time to soak in each gorgeous environment. That's something I was doing a lot in this game because, oh my god, the art direction in this game certainly lives up to expectations. There is such a great variety of truly unique levels here, like we got the mind of a doctor with a gambling addiction, so they create this level that combines the hospital theme with the neon poker chip aesthetic that you'd expect from a bustling casino. That is something they're really good with here, stacking these totally different themes into something new. For example, we got this level about a writer, so you know, we have the obvious library aesthetic, but they don't stop there. They explore different parts of this person's life using that same visual language. So you get these incredible environments like a harbor made from books and letters, the water's all ink, and the crescent moon's even a lowercase c. Elements from the most out there of Psychonauts 1 levels become the norm here. Environments warp and twist way more frequently, with all these impossible 3D spaces to remind you how far we are from reality. I'm sure those new solid-state drives of high-end PCs and new consoles and stuff make short work of those load times, but I was still really impressed seeing how freaking seamless they got these things working on PS4 too. Like when you go in this giant bottle and it just becomes a hallway that unravels into an entire memory from this guy's past. Oh my, wow. This right here was my favorite level in the entire game. Bob's Bottles, oh my god, dude. Like, you're sailing around this little planet, going from island to island, and it's really cute and fun, but it is the story here that really got me. No spoilers, but you got this sweet old gardener guy who's, you know, he's experienced loss and he has trouble socializing now, and you gotta help him understand that growing relationships, like, yeah, it's hard, but it's equally as important. It's like complicated seeds. You just gotta find out how to water them, you know? Really didn't expect the Psychonauts 2 art to bring me to tears, yet here I am, like Uncle Bob, dude. I don't make me talk about Uncle Bob. I can't talk about Uncle Bob right now. I can't do this. I think the fan favorite level this time is gonna be Psy King Sensorium. I mean, look at this place. It certainly is a feast for the senses, kind of like an old Beatles music video, except in playable form. Raz even looks a little cel-shaded here. It all looks so unbelievably different from the rest of the game. And you know, it would also be one thing to just use the acid trip aesthetic because they thought it looked cool, but I feel like there's a better story reason for it here. This is a nearly dead human brain that was in a jar for 20 years with absolutely zero stimulation in that time. So what happens if we take that brain and put it in a body that gives it senses? What happens if we allow that thing to feel the world again?
I'm here. Everything's here. Too many things are here.
You're experiencing a sensory overload.
That's why the level looks like this. It's such a fun freaking idea. They also use that idea of being cut off from the world as a way to explore this really cool theme of reconnection. You get this guy's old band back together, but each band member is another sense that we're reconnecting. Some characters even have multiple levels in their mind, like our old buddy Ford Cruller. You thought his fractured mind looked strange from the outside. Imagine how it looks in there. And as you put the pieces back together, you might just start learning some things about Ford that Raz wasn't ready to see. I tell you, this game's plot has everything. It's got comedy, drama, mystery, betrayal, all of those little seeds they planted in the first game. Yeah, this is where they all come into play. The relationships between the characters are all explored so much further, and we get to see so much more of the Psychonauts universe. The Psychic Six, Raz's family, what does the Psychonauts HQ look like? What do people do there? What does Sasha do in his lab? How did this all come to be? You know, a bunch of hippies in the woods with psychic powers exploring the capabilities and limits of the human mind in a really weird time before they could even figure out what was really ethical and not, and finding how to get there so they can get funding from the government and stuff like that. It is all so interesting hearing about all of it, and it had me glued to that controller until I absorbed every last detail. If you were in love with the story of the first game and you had really high hopes for the sequel exploring it all even further, good God, do they deliver on it so freaking hard. Even the world's smallest pony that Raz escaped on, they remember that, and it even has a name now.
Hey, I sent Sugar Cube back home as soon as I got to the train tracks.
Stuff like that, you know, like the writing is the brush, and Schafer knows how to paint a smile. But those words wouldn't be anything if it weren't for the incredible delivery from the voice talent here. Those subtle vocal touches, like when Horvitz squeezes out just the most genuine little giggle.
Well, I ought to let you get back to work.
Raz remains just the sweetest little protagonist ever. Like, I'll be damned if I ever play as a more likable character. Watching him geek out in the presence of every psychic big cool guy.
Would you sign my copy of Mindswarm?
And struggling to socialize with his new peers.
What are you doing, weirdo?
And whipping out the hot takes when he gets adorably opinionated.
Please. Nessie would totally win because Nessie is real.
Everything is written with purpose. Subplots that seemingly meant nothing always find a clever way to wriggle back into the main plot. And the collectibles, they do an even better job of conveying the memories of each host. Seeing all of these brand new figments in huge HD quality, and now with more animation on them, and the way they provide more context to the environments, and that it does when you get one. God, I'm still having a really weird time getting over the fact that we're finally looking at like a super graphics version of all of this. I didn't have as bad a time finding figments this time. They're a lot bigger, and they also stand out a little better in general, and after you play through the whole level, the rooms you're left to warp back to are pretty manageable. However, I really don't know why I can't see how many I have per room anymore. Every area in Psychonauts 1 had its own total screen, and yeah, while it was annoying as hell that you had to go to each area to see what you had there, I did at least like seeing what I had there. I did like knowing when I had everything here before I moved on. Now, if you're missing a single figment in a level, you don't even know what room it's in. The total screen only shows the level overall, making the needle in a haystack problem, but well, I don't want to say even worse because I actually didn't have as bad a time finding them overall. I thought 100% was actually a little bit smoother this time, but this is still an annoyance the first game was lacking. Though they did improve the total screen overall, you now have an easily comprehensible list of levels that you can browse through and check up on at any time you like, so you at least don't have to go all the way back out to the Collective Unconscious to look at every single door anymore. Yeah, getting the final few figments is still a pretty big pain in the ass, but the hub worlds are where collecting things really shine for me. I had an absolute blast looking for every little nook and cranny here, and the scavenger hunt, it is just as fun as before. And there it is, 100% platinum trophy. Buddy, I could not put the goddamn game down. Even after finishing it, I still had no reason to stop. All of the optional dialogue and flavor text that remains after the credits roll, asking each character what they thought of the plot twists and what they'll do after the story's done. What a cherry on a cake. Psychonauts 2 is an incredible video game. It is one of the best platformers I've ever played, and it is mind-boggling to me that after what hell this project went through, it is now this. It's a game that completely understands all of the strengths of the original while realizing all of this narrative brilliance that they planted in the first game without you even knowing. But not only that, but it also does a really good job of expanding on the platforming and the combat, making them into some of the best the entire genre can offer. Mind you, it's not a perfect video game. Like I said, I wish the levels did get a little bit more out of those extra moves. I wish some of the character designs were generally less tame, and there's a lot of minor graphical hiccups and some pretty bad long load times, at least on PS4 and PS4 Pro. I can't speak for more powerful hardware like the PS5 and Xbox Series X and good PCs. I don't have any of that shit. But if you're stuck in last gen like I am, don't worry. It's all small fry in the grand scope of things, really. It's nothing bad enough to stay away from the PS4 version or anything like that. I mean, it's bananas it runs at all because this is a sequel that shouldn't have even happened, but despite all odds, it found a way to exist. Not in a form that's good enough, or had to be rushed, or had compromises made, or content cut, but in a form that made sure to be everything it wanted to be while it had that 1 in a million chance. And it will never happen again if you boneheads don't buy it this time, so please don't let it flop like the first time. Microsoft's gotta look at a really big number if they're gonna make more cool stuff like this, but even if it does never happen again, I'm always gonna be thankful for this thing finally getting made. It is a miracle this thing got finished, and it's equally as inspiring, the fight that was fought to get it there, so thanks, Tim. Thank you for fighting that fight until Psychonauts 2 was more than just an idea. Hey, what's up? Thanks for watching my video about Psychonauts 2. I really hope this review convinced you to buy the game. It is an incredible game, and I really want to see it do well. And hey, if you're watching this video and it's still new, we've got another t-shirt up at TheYetee.com until October 15th, 2021. I'll have a link down below for anybody that wants to put on Kevin's latest masterpiece. He also drew the moveset for this video, so huge shout out to Kevin.